live. Boom. Bryan, say hello to these people so they can see your pretty face at home.
Hey, guys.
Ryan, we need to make you one of these cool backdrops.
Well, I'm slacking a little bit. My bad.
Well, it's cool. I could just abscond with company resources and print them out again and then just tape them together for you. That's what this is. This is DIY, grew up listening to too much straight edge hardcore and making band flyers. That's what this whole backdrop is. And you love me for it.
I've got like a few like Mardi Gras kind of decorations hanging in the back on the corner of the mirrors. So because I went to New Orleans a couple months ago, so that's what I got going on.
Yeah, but I see those beads, and my next thing is I want to see you topless, and that's just not cool, man.
Well,
you're just letting our fans and followers down.
I'm not gonna say what I had to do to get those beads, but we'll just leave it at that.
You mean who you had to do to get those beats?
Hey. Michelle might be listening to this, so let's leave it there.
Oh, don't kid yourself. Not even your girlfriend watches our stupid show. As I look down and see 0 viewers right now, but it's okay because we actually started on time. So why would people watch? I just sent out tweets to. I had multiple people ask, and I was like, hey, yeah, not only do I reply in a timely fashion, get you. You don't even have the courtesy to, man, I'm not asking for a bead here. I'm just asking for some viewership, so I'm not talking at my friend and smiling with these bright-ass lights that I have. Whatever.
Hey,
Bryan,
how
we watch.
I mean, I have room lighting. Do I need to get like some crazy-ass bulb action? Like you?
I have an extra one that I can give you. The whole rig costs like $20. It's too bright for me, I think. I think I need to tone it down because I don't have eyebrows in most of the video because I'm so pale. It washes me out. But I specifically picked a wattage that, or not wattage, a lumens that was like an oranger tone because I'm so fucking pale. And it hasn't done me any good. So, sorry, guys. That's. You said what now?
I said Donald Trump tone. You got to get that.
Don't say that. Don't. That's words can hurt, Bryan. That's just uncalled for. So, speaking of words hurting, I wanted to hurt children throughout the entire UFC 198, which we watched together at a mutual friend's mutual uncle's house, and there were children nonstop.
Yeah, I don't know if like I appreciate the sentiment of getting the invite to go to somebody's house to watch it, and this and that, but like. God, I talked to Michelle after the fights, and I was just like, maybe we'll wait.
Yeah. If I didn't have court this morning, I would have gotten a vasectomy today.
I'm pretty sure Sierra totally, missed out on that one. She was good on that.
Oh yeah, and her hormones are still going to be out of whack. She's still going to be all baby crazy. So then I think that we kind of maybe want UFC 199 to be back there so that we can show her she can revolt in fear. And then I can just get into my mid-40s and adopt some African child from some country I can't pronounce.
I like it. I like the idea, man. So, be Uncle Bryan. Yeah.
So let's go through Let's go through the main event first, as we do, because why not start with the most exciting and most relevant fight and then work our way down to fights that are meaningless? I don't know, but I just can't hold back my excitement. Bryan Miocic is the new heavyweight champion of the world.
Welter what?
Yeah, I was like, wait a second. There's something wrong there.
Yeah, man.
I think I looked at his haircut and was thinking of Matt Hughes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I can see that. It was funny. It was when we were watching it, Michelle was just like, yeah, I could have guessed he was from Ohio just from his haircut.
Or that damn tribal with kanji going down his back. I mean, man. Yeah. Stipe, I like you so much, but that tattoo is like almost as bad as Connor's tribal thorns going up to the cross with wings.
Right.
How religious is Conor McGregor if he's saying to beat up Jesus? I'm just saying.
That's true. I mean, would it be much to say Stipe extinguished Werdum's fiery, win streak? Anybody?
How about this? I didn't know that Fabricio Werdum and Fedor were related because he was rushing that whole fight. I mean, what the hell? I've never seen Werdum fight like that. I go on the show, I make this prediction, technique, perfect precision. I told people, watch the Travis Brown fight. He's very calculated. And then he just like herp the derp. Like maybe Rafael Cordero like wound him up too much, like those little tin toys, and he just started fucking going. And I have no idea what happened.
Yeah, and you know what? It could have been any number of things. I mean, you hate to chalk it up to something like nerves because Werdum's been in big fights before, but shit happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, he's been in big fights, but he hasn't been in a giant soccer stadium that's the third highest attended UFC of all time.
Right. Yeah, and it's something that people jump the gun all the time on things, and unfortunately, it was for a heavyweight championship fight. And he paid for it, but learning mistake, and he'll kind of move on from that. I think it was interesting that he, afterwards, he pretty much said, "Oh yeah, I'll definitely be getting a rematch," or at least he was hoping for it. But I don't really see one getting sent to him.
Yeah, if Jose Aldo doesn't get a rematch, Fabricio Werdum doesn't get a rematch. That's his first defense.
Right.
I mean, he had an interim title fight against Mark Hunt. Then he beat Kane. There's no question. Right. But this was his first defense. He lost. This isn't a guy who was reigning for undefeated for 9 years. This is a guy who at his first try got a huge stage, everything set up for him, and then didn't really perform. One thing that my conspiracy theory, and I think we both can kind of attest to my track record, I'm not the biggest conspiracy theorist, but I really think he might have had like a significant injury or something leading into it because he was so impulsive and so impetuous. I felt like he was desperate to try and get that fight finished. I mean, he looked frantic at a certain point trying to
finish
Miocic.
That's definitely a possibility, especially because if you were to look at like Stipe's fighting style comparatively to like Cain Velasquez, I don't think there's going to be that frenetic pace that Cain Velasquez has compared to Stipe. So for Werdum to be able to last as long as he did with Cain Velasquez before he finished him, it definitely brings your theory a little bit of credibility as far as, he's not just going to try and finish something just because a guy is a strong striker. It just doesn't seem like that makes any sense.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And one thing I wanted to talk about, kind of to your point, when we're talking about the Cain Velasquez matchup, he was so aggressive. He moves forward. That's the reason JDS was on his heels the whole time, reacting. And so one thing I wanted to talk about is that the term of, octagon control is complete bullshit. If you look at the statistics, officially per fight metric, Stipe Miocic has 1 second of cage control the entire match. And it just shows you that, here is a guy who didn't look rocked, he didn't look in danger, but somebody was charging at him. And to a layman judge, this is why people get screwed, because this guy's pressing forward and this guy's reacting. And I feel like largely we're seeing a lot of judges illustrate a more savvy understanding of striking, lateral movement and whatnot. But this just shows that, what did Stipe do? He circled along that outside edge. You watch that whole mechanism as it goes. You can see, for those of you listening, sorry, but I'm gesturing with my hands. Stipe is back against the cage. Werdum steps forward. He circles to the point where he's on top of him. It's just if you've seen that Karate Kid remake where Jackie Chan makes Jaden Smith take off the jacket and he swishes it over to the side and then uses that. And that's what it was, right? That's all Werdum Miocic did in training camp was take off jackets.
Yeah, but it's essentially everybody that's in the octagon should do that, or at least practice that, because how many people get pressed up against cage and just literally sit there? If somebody's coming, if somebody's bum rushing you, you're either A, going to get locked up against a cage and then just sit there, or B, you're going to have to expend a lot of energy and then try and whizzer out, or essentially, over under and turn them so that they're on the cage and you're pressed up against them. But how much energy and time does that take? Instead of backing up and circling like Stipe did.
Yeah, and he did a great, mechanism. And it was weird because I don't think you can game plan like that for Werdum. I mean, have you ever seen Werdum do that before? So that just shows like his reactive nature. That's one of the things I found most impressive is I can't imagine a scenario where you would have game planned that Fabricio Werdum would be an overly aggressive striker plotting forward. I mean, think about it. Just a few years ago, he had that fight with Overeem where they rematched, and Overeem was sitting there looming over him while he was on the ground because he was too afraid to get up. So it was kind of bizarre in that regard. One thing I wanted to note, this has happened before, and maybe I'm up fight metrics nuts on this fight, but according to them, every single strike from both guys was significant. Now, do you think that's just because they're heavyweights, or do you think that's because that methodical pace they were operating with? Because, I mean, let's face it, it was a flash, but it was a 2-minute and 14-second flash.
Right.
So there's a substantial amount of stuff leading up to it.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard. It's hard to tell. I want to say it's almost like a heavyweight thing, just because guys aren't slipping punches. You know what I mean? It's not like you're seeing guys, busting some Dominic Cruz style, stand up. So, it seems like it kind of makes sense for it to be a lot more significant strikes than other weight classes.
Absolutely. I largely agree. And one thing I wanted to ask you, and we talked about this as we were watching, one of our fans, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but I think I retweeted it. The guy said something to the effect of, now here's the great debate. If Werdum wins, we're going to say that him making that silly face illustrated that he was relaxed. But if he loses, he wasn't taking the fight seriously enough.
Right.
I mean, do you agree with that sentiment? Or are you of the opinion that
absolutely. I don't agree with that at all. I feel like it's just Werdum being Werdum. I don't think he is. I feel like he's always kind of a laid back guy. You know what I mean? I don't think it's necessarily him being more so relaxed than other times. I don't know. I feel like it might be looking too much into it.
Yeah, well, I think that guys like Anderson Silva have kind of ruined it for everybody because now we scrutinize these guys, right? We look at their fights and their performances and we go, oh, well, he clearly didn't prepare well enough. Like his physique isn't as good, or his scowl isn't that severe. And really, that's just kind of a nonsensical point, right? Because it's like you're going into a fight. And like I honestly kind of appreciate the sense of humor. Like it was interesting because as soon as he did that last one in the cage, it stopped and he had a very focused scowl. But think about truly at its nature, fighting is kind of an absurd thing. We're saying this is state sanctioned. We can get in this cage and hit each other in our underpants. But if I hit you outside of this cage before that bell rings, that's illegal. That's a crime. And if I hit you after that bell rings, that's illegal. That's a crime. And like I have my grandma probably in the crowd watching me in my underpants. Like, if you're that fucking serious about it, it's kind of weird when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, and essentially, the way I look at it, he's the heavyweight champion. He can do whatever the fuck he wants. So, I mean, for him to make funny faces, I feel like that's so menial. You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
Yeah, right. I mean, you are the baddest man on the planet. And if you're the baddest man on the planet, you're not intimidated, right? You're just
exactly.
OG pimpin', right? Is OG pimpin' a thing? I don't know.
Yeah. So how about this? Werdum Velasquez rematch. Huh?
I say the nay. I do like that as a fight, just anecdotally. But here's my thinking. Junior Dos Santos immediately comes out and starts talking about Werdum. He comes out saying he wasn't surprised because Werdum is, quote, not a striker. I think that's awesome because now you have JDS, who's coming off of that the loss to Overeem. You put Overeem against Stipe, and now if JDS can beat Werdum, you set him up for a rematch with Reem, and then if Werdum beats JDS, then you set him up with that rubber match with Overeem or the rematch with Miocic.
So there's just Cain Velasquez looking on the outside.
Yeah, well, I think Velasquez has to beat Brown. We both think that he's going to beat Brown, but who knows what the timetable is going to be like. He's not even fighting until July. I think that
he'll even stay healthy.
That's honestly, I didn't want to make fun of him for it, but that's a serious concern. If you're the UFC, you can't bill that guy as the main event anymore. It's
No,
too many times he's blown out on it, and it's like
kind of messed up.
Yeah, his UFC 200 like casting where he's the opener, perfect. Keep him there. And even if he is to fight for a title again, honestly, I don't mean to be hyperbolic or exaggerate. He should not be the main event. Put him on a card for the heavyweight title with somebody like Ronda Rousey at the main event, somebody like Conor McGregor at the main event. I know it goes against the whole weight class, the heaviest weight going first.
He can definitely help sell a card. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. He clearly doesn't have the personality to do anything extra. And so why not just use him as an addendum? It's like, oh, here, and then plus this.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I wanted to...
So did you note that, one quick thing was that, JDS had said that, Werdum wasn't a striker. And I thought it was interesting that JDS said that Stipe was better than Overeem, but he just lost to Overeem. Do you think that that's kind of, obviously MMA math is bullshit, but it's just like, wait, so if this guy's better than the guy who beat you, does that make that guy better than you? What do you think he's saying there? Or is he just trying to make a headline with his somewhat cherubic and jovial Brazilian baldness?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's just kind of like a headline thing. I don't really think there's much meaning to it.
Yeah, kind of grasping at straws to stay relevant. It makes sense.
Exactly. Oh, I don't know if I heard this somewhere in the broadcast or not, but they were saying something about like a curse on the heavyweights in the UFC. Apparently, they have like a 2-fight win streak and then they lose.
Yep.
Is there anything? Have you heard anything about that? Or?
Oh yeah. For the longest time, Brock Lesnar was the longest reigning UFC champ ever. I think that Cain Velasquez ended up beating him in terms of days, but he also had injuries in between. And one of the reasons why Brock Lesnar had a prolonged title reign was because he had that diverticulitis and he didn't fight, so his inactivity. But yeah, the heavyweight division is and has always been fucking cursed. Like, you don't have a dominant heavyweight champion. It doesn't exist.
So Werdum took it from Velasquez, who took it from
JDS.
Santos.
Yep.
And Dos Santos took it from
Velasquez.
Cain Velasquez.
And Velasquez took it from...
I'm grafting here. Brock Lesnar.
Yes. Wait. Yes. Yes. That's the one where Brock does the tumble backwards. Remember the barrel roll?
Holy shit. So since 2010, there's been like 4 changing of guards of heavyweight champions. Damn.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to pull up the I want to pull up the hierarchy, the chronological listing of the UFC heavyweight title, because it is to the point of just laughable. There's just it's a farcical idea that you will have a dominant heavyweight champion. And
that's interesting. Okay, so like I'm not trying to like talk shit on Overeem because he's strung a few wins in a row, and he obviously is going to be fighting for a championship here. But I don't know. Like, I feel like I see him struggle a lot in his fights. So, like, I feel like this trend will continue if he were to win.
Actually, now that I'm looking back, it wasn't Cain Velasquez won it from. Wait, what? This whole thing is. The Wikipedia version is stupid, but it goes back. Yeah, well, if you look, Cain Velasquez has the longest reign of 896 days, and the longest reign before that was Brock Lesnar of 707 days. That's the point I was making. It's absolutely insane that this pro wrestler.
Is that 707 days? Was Brock Lesnar injured in any of that, as far as his diverticulitis or anything like, or is that after?
Yes. He only fought twice with the title, and that was in that 707 days, which included his surgery where he had, I think it was 11 feet of intestine or something taken out. Like,
you're basically saying like 2 of the longest holding champions, heavyweight champions of the UFC, are both like knocked out as far as fighting terms when it comes to injuries for a significant amount of time. Those 2 are the ones that have the longest reign. That's kind of sad.
Yes. That's true. And it's like, it's especially funny to me as a social commentary or whatever, that you have Stipe who's taking the title to Cleveland, which has had a drought, and it's like, yeah, statistically, you're going to have a champion for one fight, and then the next fight he's going to lose.
Right.
Like it's just so interesting to me.
Yeah,
and
absurd.
Sure, Stipe might be that guy to dominate, but I mean, if you look at his striking compared to Alistair Overeem's, Overeem's got a pretty decent argument that he can whoop ass. I mean, I'm not an Overeem fan. I'm a much bigger Stipe fan, but Stipe wasn't raised a striker or anything.
The thing with Overeem, though, is he's very cocky. And with that cockiness, it's like he leaves himself open a lot. So,
oh, you mean like he did with Travis Brown when he let him get kicked in the face like 4 freaking times and had his head fly off? Right. Or when he was fighting Bigfoot and he just coasted through that last round and got his head bludgeoned to shit? Or when he fought Ben Rothwell and got titty danced at? Let's not forget that titty dance.
Exactly. All right, well, you want to move on to the next fight?
I do, because this fight made my dick happy. I hate Vitor Belfort, and apparently the people of Brazil agree with me now. Did you hear the boos?
Yeah, man. It was exciting. I was really stoked about like the negativity that was coming Vitor's way.
Ooh, vai morrer. That's what I didn't really catch it when we were at Jim's uncle's house because of the crazy chitlin running around making noise. But when I got home and I rewatched the fight, I was just giddy to the point of tickled pink that we had Vitor Belfort being rude and abused verbally. I loved it. And then Jacare abused him physically as if he were his cousin in a trailer park in an episode of Cops on Spike TV. It was glorious. Bryan, what were your thoughts?
Oh my God. You know what? Like, I feel like Jacare did exactly what the game plan was. He was going to go out. He was going to tie up Vitor. He wasn't going to let him have his distance and essentially take him down and throw a couple submission attempts in there and then just destroy. I mean, I was thoroughly impressed.
So here's a fun stat for you. 54 strikes to 5.
Yeah.
Not all of them significant strikes, but
5 were on his back.
Yeah. Well, Vitor had 4 significant strikes, 1 insignificant, or just so it comes up to a total of 5. But 54. You know the other person who got a 10-to-1 ratio? Cyborg to Smith. Yeah, that's right. Jacare Souza beat Belfort statistically as bad, if not worse, than Cyborg beat Smith. You can quote me on it. I can prove it with brass, black and white, or black and yellow, because that's how I write on a legal pad for my notes for the show.
That's really saying something. I mean, I'm not discrediting Cyborg's fight against Smith at all, but I mean, as far as the caliber of fighter and the experience, Vitor has definitely been around for a while. And he's
a former champ who just recently fought for a title. I mean, he's on a 1-fight winning streak when he beat Dan Henderson, but before that, he was fighting for middleweight gold. And then a couple fights before that, he fought for light heavyweight gold. And then years ago, he was light heavyweight champion. I mean, this is a guy with a storied career who got whooped upon.
Right. I mean, it's for that kind of stat disparity is ridiculous. I mean, it's awesome is what it is. It's ridiculously awesome, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And so here's a fun fact about Vitor that I just kind of stumbled upon when I looked at his record. Vitor Belfort hasn't beaten anyone under the age of 40 in 3 years. That's right. Only 2 wins in the last 3 years have been against Dan Henderson, who respectively was 42 and 44 at the time of those fights. That shows you where he's at. I mean, Jacare is significantly – he's not that much significantly younger. That's the point I'm making. You know, it's not as though he's, you know, I don't think that this is fight miles. He's not like Shogun to me, where I think that the guy's like dangerous because he's hurting himself. Nothing like that. This is a guy who's clearly lost that little boost that he had, and he's paying for it. And we both commented about the fact Homeboy has dangly long nipples at this point. I'm not talking about the meaty tit skin.
Eraser nipples.
Exactly. I called them Pez cubes. You called them erasers. But in either scenario, it is irrefutable, irrebuttable. Vitor Belfort has long nipples. You could put bugles on those things, and you wouldn't even notice they were there.
Hashtag long nipples.
There we go. So what do you do with these guys? Because guess what happens after that fight? No change in ranking at all.
Right.
Souza's still 2, Vitor's still 3, and everybody just goes about their mighty way. Because number 4 is Michael Bisping. So, obviously Vitor had beaten Bisping, so he's not going to go back past him. So really, there was no consequence to this fight. We just gave Jacare a fight to where now we can arguably say, if you take away his loss to Yoel Romero because of A, the steroids, and B, the split decision nature of it, and he beats Belfort, is there anybody who has a better claim to that middleweight title shot next than Jacare?
I feel like he's number 1.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I find interesting is if Rockhold's able to get past Weidman, they have history. I mean, you even heard in the cage afterwards where Jacare was saying that he shouldn't have lost his fight to Luke Rockhold. And one of the judges, it was his first fight that he was judging. I actually hadn't ever heard that. But the only thing that could stand in his way is if Chris Weidman wins and does so in spectacular fashion, and for the first time in UFC history, they do a rubber match in immediate succession.
Right.
That's the only thing I can think that could hold him back, because logically he's far superior. And even if Yoel Romero should get his suspension over by the end of June and try and fight again, I don't think that that's what you want. You don't want a guy who's embroiled in controversy.
Right.
You don't want the asterisk. We've had champions with asterisks before. Look at Sean Shirk. Look at Tim Sylvia. These kinds of things. Josh Barnett back in the day. These are things we cannot have in our sport when we're trying to legitimize. So I say it's Souza or it's no one. It's like Souza or it's a rubber match, but there's no way where Yoel Romero gets ahead of Jacare at this point, and really nobody else can.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, like, I don't know. I feel like that win that Yoel Romero had should not be a win. I mean, I don't know.
I agree. It should be – honestly, it shouldn't even go to no contest. If you get popped for steroids, you should lose that fight. You were disqualified. Right. You used fraudulent pretenses in order to obtain an advantage over someone, put their life at risk, and for that, you shouldn't get a 1 in that other column. You should get a 1 in the column that counts. Because guess what? Nobody gives a fuck if you're 5, 10, and 2. We're only looking at 5 and 10. That other one is just a whatever. It's just to say, oh, well, it's not in either of these categories. But that's bullshit. And I think that there needs to be swifter, harsher punishments. And quite frankly, like, the idea that he took a tainted supplement seems awfully convenient. And
right.
I'm just not digging it. And I just don't like Yoel Romero, especially after that Tim Kennedy fight. So I'm super high on Jacare, and I would really love for him to get that title shot. Who do you give Vitor Belfort next?
I didn't even really put too much thought into that. I'm just so focused on him losing now. I guess I don't know. Who do you have him fighting next to be a legitimate fight in that Vitor will absolutely get wrecked again? Because that's what I want to see.
Anderson Silva. Only fight that I think that you can do. Because it's a big name fight. It's a fight that is winnable for him. But actually, I hesitate on saying winnable. I don't want to sound overly confident in that, because check this out. Statistically, in Vitor Belfort's UFC career, and I mentioned this the night of the fights, but nobody really gave me credence, Vitor Belfort has only beaten one person outside of the first round in his UFC career, and that was Michael Bisping. He has never won a fight outside of the first round in the UFC. Quote me on it. I can prove it. So the way that you're going to beat Anderson Silva is to do what Michael Bisping did and establish dominance over a 5-round fight. I don't think that he would win in that rematch, but I would love to see him get kicked in the face again. So I'd like that. For selfish reasons, I'd want that Anderson Silva rematch.
What do you think about Uriah Hall?
I think that's a fair fight. I think it's great. I mean, I wonder if they're going to put it back on after Anderson's injury. I think that it's definitely UFC 200 worthy. I think that it'd be awesome to see as a Fight Pass feature fight. Could you imagine? You have Anderson, who was on the Fight Pass main event in London. Then you do this. I think that'd be a killer. Another fight that I think would be great. Obviously, he's not going to be fighting Lyoto Machida, even though they've kind of alluded. Lyoto's kind of said, "Hey, I'd fight him," but Anderson said, "No, I wouldn't because of like the respect, blah blah." But the one that I would really like to see is the Gegard Mousasi fight, because Gegard had said that he wanted to fight him, and I think stylistically, just as a technique fanboy, I'd love that because Gegard is a guy who's not afraid to have a boring fight to win. And I don't think that it's a boring fight in the sense that he can't engage like when Demian Maia fought him. I think rather that it would be a supreme showing of dominance if he could avoid, getting spinning wheel kicked in the head or something.
How about this? Vitor Belfort, Robert Whittaker.
Oh, I would love that fight because I'm a huge Robert Whittaker fan,
right?
And I think that Whittaker's chances are solid.
Yeah,
I think that his chances are
that would be a
solid
really
doing
good
that
fight to take because Vitor obviously with his name and Whittaker being an up and coming fighter who's on a 6-fight win streak or some shit like that.
Yeah, and he was supposed to fight Michael Bisping. Don't forget that. Michael Bisping ended up pulling out and having elbow surgery, but he was gonna fight Robert Whittaker, and that would have been a great fight for Whittaker's career, win or lose. And this is a situation, win or lose against Belfort. You get that name brand notoriety, and if you get knocked out or should somehow lose, yeah, you lost to a guy who's a former champ who's fought against champions, and you're a kid who won the Ultimate Fighter a couple of years ago. So I think that's actually a really brilliant bit of matchmaking, Brian. I commend you for it. Now, let's go to the next fight on the card. Chris Cyborg versus Leslie Smith.
Yeah. That was brutal. That was, brutality. That's the only thing that came to mind.
Are you surprised at the hullabaloo about that being a bad stoppage? I'm kind of
No. Come on. I saw Leslie Smith arguing to the ref after the fact, and it's your face was going to get obliterated. He did you a favor. Just leave it at that. I get it. You're in the heat of the moment, but come on. Really?
It was the heat of the moment.
Exactly.
About your heart, man. I agree with you. One thing that, and I might be reading too much into fighter psychology, so Brian, please stop me if you think I'm being overboard or almost ridiculous with this. Okay. This fight reminded me so much of Alexis Davis versus Ronda Rousey. And I don't know if you remember that fight. That was a fight where Alexis Davis is coming out to the octagon and she's singing that Lord song that's super fucking annoying. And she's swaying her head and she's just sitting there and she's smiling and she's not jumping around or shadow boxing like Rousey. And she gets lit up and fucking dies. And if you watch the embedded and you watch Leslie Smith's demeanor leading up to this, she's just totally copacetic. And I get her name's the Peacemaker, but it was bizarre. She had just accepted her fate. But then for the first time that we saw this crazy passion was when she lost and she's fucking bullshit. Ah! It was
right. It's the same thing that happened with Leslie Smith.
Oh no, I'm saying that is Leslie Smith. Right. Yeah, exactly. But wasn't that weird that she for the first time seemed amped? It was almost like when Kat Zingano lost to Ronda Rousey, and she's oh no, now I'm ready. Now I'm excited. Now my heart rate's up. But before it really wasn't. And I got work.
Well, you know what? It's crazy. Because I've talked about it before when it comes to wrestling and during wrestling tournaments or wrestling matches, you would sit there hours before a fight or hours before a match, and your adrenaline is just so. You're so juiced and ready to go, and you just get so burnt out on waiting that you almost have an energy dump where you're just you literally have no energy whatsoever. And I'm not saying that's what happened, but it kind of would go into what would possibly happen, as far as people being oh, okay, well now I'm ready to go because their adrenaline's going when they actually were in the fight, even though they lost. There's, if that makes any sense. I don't know.
It does. Absolutely does. You hear about fighters having that adrenaline dump, just, the crowd, the nerves, but then also, Cyborg is intimidating. Cyborg is a gal who's a champion 20 pounds above a fight class that Leslie Smith used to fight in. There's a big difference between 125 and 145, and I get that it's a 140 catch weight, but 5 pounds, you can't argue that Cyborg's frame is bigger, all of those issues. Now, Brian, let me ask you this. I'm talking about featherweight. What legitimate reason do we have not to have a women's featherweight division in the UFC?
Right.
What's the one thing that everybody says right now is the one reason why we don't have it? Talent. Everybody's saying there's just not enough talent out there. To that, I say poo-poo. Look at Leslie Smith's record. It is now 8-7-1, and she is a UFC fighter. She is a notable, well-liked, unranked, but still popular women's bantamweight fighter. So how can you tell me with a straight face that we don't have that we couldn't find women at 145? You do a season of The Ultimate Fighter, winner fights Cyborg, it sells itself.
Imagine how many people would jump ship from Invicta if not. I mean, just like essentially have some sort of partnership with Invicta as far as having a crop of fighters go through the league, or I don't know if you call it a league or just the rankings of Invicta, and then boom, jump up to the UFC.
Well, that's one of the things that they did with the strawweight division. They just effectively bought the women's strawweight division. And the thing is, when you're so intertwined with the UFC being on UFC Fight Pass, why the fuck not? How about this? How about we do a co-promotion season of The Ultimate Fighter where we talk about Invicta on FX, because that's just free advertising for UFC Fight Pass. So UFC's winning the whole thing. You put Cyborg as a coach versus Jermaine Durandame as the other coach. You have them be the coaches of the teams, coaching the featherweights that are going to come up. There's that kind of controversy where it's like what you're doing with the flyweights with Henry Cejudo and Joseph Benavidez. And now we have all these layers, and then you get a fucking title fight at the end of it. That's the best way to reignite my interest in The Ultimate Fighter, because I haven't watched that shit in years. Am I crazy?
It's been a long time for me. I can't even tell you the last time I watched The Ultimate Fighter. But yeah, I mean that all makes total sense. Absolutely. One thing I wanted to add. Okay, how about this? This is interesting. You look at the UFC's refs, right? Generally, they make some good calls. They don't wait until somebody gets their face beat in, mercilessly before they make the call. As of late, we were talking about Leslie Smith, arguing the call like it's an early stoppage, this or that. But clearly, Cyborg was about to fucking destroy you. So it was a good call. On the other hand, you look at the Bellator fight with Cyborg, the other Cyborg with the penis. Well, actually, they both had penises. But I digress.
Okay, one is a dick and one is a clit dick, Brian. If you're going to use sensational speech on this podcast, I will not stand for you using inaccurate jargon. Our fans need our medical accuracy, sir.
Anyways, so the difference between, there's like stark contrast between the UFC stoppage and the Bellator stoppage of both Cyborgs, right? I mean, I was watching the Cyborg and Bellator, and I'm like, oh god, this needs to stop like 2+ minutes ago. Like, how many
unanswered shots?
How many strikes landed on that guy's dome? Oh my god!
Can you tell me how many were unanswered, Brian?
No.
62 strikes unanswered from Cyborg, the male Cyborg. 62 unanswered strikes. Oh, that's what? And then you compare that to like stoppages like when, I said it before, and you can all call me full of shit. Cerrone versus Dos Anjos was stopped too quick. And sure, Cowboy was in a bad way, but Dos Anjos landed, 3-4 strikes to the back of Cerrone's hand? That's it? Really? Right. And we're going to say that the fight is over. But then you can have this schmuckhole who's won one fight in 20 fucking bouts, and he gets hit 61 times, and the ref is still like, nah, not yet. Let's just see how this plays out. Like, has anybody ever, even Rocky Balboa fighting the Russian, ever been hit 61 times and a ref been like, let him go at it?
You know what's funny is
what the fuck?
I was expecting his face to swell up so big, like the whole Ken Shamrock, Tito Ortiz, pumpkin head. But afterwards, when they were both standing, I was like, wow, he actually took the punishment fairly well.
Well, because he has so many craters in his face that when it swells up, those just kind of become regular level, like the rest of the face. It's just flat, man.
Can you tell our viewers what you were saying about his face at Fred's house?
Oh, God. Oh, yeah. I said something to the equivalent about Cyborg and him having sex and her injecting sperm into his body so hard that it came out of his facial pores, and that's why he has those big craters. It was Cyborg's cum shooting up through his body out of his face.
He said something like Cyborg doing kegels and then squirting cum onto his face.
Yeah. No, that was what it was. That's what it was. He came into her. She did a kegel, crushed his penis, shot the sperm back up into his body, circled up through his balls. Like, you remember when he played Roller Coaster Tycoon and there was that one that was like Montezuma's Revenge where you do the loop and go up? So the sperm goes up into his balls, loops around them a couple times, shoots up his spinal column, out his facial pores.
I can't handle it, dude. I can't. Let's move on.
All right. So let's. Can we have a gentleman's agreement that we'll retouch on this? We'll dog ear this conversation because I think there's a few more anatomical steps that need to be addressed about Cyborg having a face full of exploding cum. But let's move on. Shogun Rua versus Corey Anderson. Did they get this fight right, Bryan?
I don't think so. I mean, I hate to be like the negative guy on like Shogun. You know, he's in Brazil, and everybody's like gung ho on him and whatnot. But I mean, I feel like it's exactly that. I feel like it was give one to the Brazilians.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of the Carlos Condit, Robbie Lawler situation where you have a guy who was significantly outstruck, but not outstruck in the ways that, where it counted. And remember, like, Shogun very arguably won the first 2 rounds with those knockdowns at the end. The second knockdown, I believe he caught Corey Anderson's foot when he was doing it. So the stats, as I'm sure you're all loving that I went on UFC.com and found stats that you yourselves could have done. I'm your curator today, just doing the work so you don't have to. Shogun, 66 strikes to Corey Anderson's 106 strikes. You have a situation where Shogun gets 2 knockdowns. Corey Anderson gets 4 takedowns. But here's where everything's kind of funky. You have Shogun with 48 significant strikes, Corey Anderson with 55 significant strikes. So less than half, or like just slightly more than half of Corey Anderson's strikes were significant, whereas almost all of Shogun's were. And rather than takedowns, he got knockdowns. Bryan, what do you think about their valuation of the stats here? Emotive response, you have this passionate crowd, you have those 2 sensational moments in the first 2 rounds, and that's what does it? Or do you think there was a lot of thought behind it?
I feel like it's kind of a little bit of both. It almost seems like they took the knockdowns as far as, I'm going to score it as a knockdown, but also I'm going to score it based on what the fans are doing, the crowd's reaction, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? It shouldn't make sense because a ref or a judge should basically be, I feel like they should have earplugs in and or be deaf to the crowd, because I feel like they do get swayed.
Sensational at all. You had the New Jersey Athletic Commission try doing things where judges were in soundproof booths or off-site watching because people get swayed. I mean, you can't argue with the fact that 45,000 Brazilians, maybe like Corey Anderson, maybe had 2 or 3 people in attendance besides his coaches, maybe. So I mean, let's argue and just say 44,900. Let's give Corey Anderson 100 of the fans. You really mean to tell me that you wouldn't be swayed by 45,900 people cheering for one man?
Right, exactly. And that's where I think it's there are those takedowns that Corey Anderson had, but at the same time, it almost seems like it was how sensational were those takedowns compared to how sensational were those knockdowns? You know what I mean? As far as what did Corey Anderson do with those takedowns? He did nothing.
Oh yeah, let's look back at think about this as well. When you had Michael Bisping versus Vanderlei Silva, the last round, Vanderlei was whooping Bisping, and it was like, oh, he got saved by the bell. And even though Bisping clearly won the first 2 rounds, in my opinion, they gave it to Vanderlei because it was sensational. It was the end. You had that mentality of saved by the bell. And Shogun kind of got to do that not once but twice. That was rough. And statistics being what they are, it doesn't matter. You have an emotive argument, and the fact that his strikes were significant. He looked way better than I suspected, and his work with Rafael Cordero was great. He was picking shots. He was being accurate. And also, Corey Anderson was being very predictable. I mean, it was getting to the point where I was going to suggest a drinking game for all of us when he did that same level change. It's like, right there. And it wasn't that he was catching him on the low end. Corey Anderson very rhythmically would pop up and bam, just get belted. And it happened again and again. He didn't do anything to modify. Now, one thing, Bryan, I don't know if you watched the show last week, but I did say that an Anderson would lose. I just did not predict which Anderson correctly because one ended up pulling out of the fight the next day after I recorded. So I was still right.
I don't know if I want to take any of your predictions seriously anymore, because it seems like a lot of the times it's I am completely I I turned on my head based on my predictions because it seems like you say that quite a lot.
What do you mean? I think that if it wasn't like, okay, no, sir, I rebut you with this. I was going to make some more points, but I was the only one in the party who thought that Barberino was going to beat Alves. And I said that even with his dad bod, I declared it a rad bod, and he won. You were there. Tell the people that I was right. Say it, Bryan.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, but let me just say, okay, it seems like a lot of fights that were pretty significant as far as major fighters are concerned. It seems like wow, I was proven wrong and like an asshole. How many times have you said that?
More than once. I don't see what that has to do with anything.
Anyways.
Let's go back to the fight that I got wrong, shall we? Who do you give Shogun next, Bryan? And I want your prediction for the fight, Bryan.
Oh, come on. I'm just having fun here. You know what? I haven't even given it much thought. I was just stoked because Shogun, he's just one of those guys that's, I always root for him, regardless of who he's going against. He's just one of those guys that's like the old guard. You know what I mean? From Pride days. I don't know how many times they remarked shoot to box, but anybody that comes from that style of fighting, I give props to. So I couldn't honestly say.
Yeah, I had really wanted to see that Rashad Evans versus Shogun fight, but I mean, now that Shogun won, why would he fight Rashad? Rashad, after today, is now ranked below Shogun.
Yeah, what is Rashad Owen? Was he 0-2, 0-3?
Yeah, he lost to Bader and he lost to Glover. So yeah, 0-2 in his last two. But I think that Shogun
lost a Little Nog not too long ago either, right?
Not that long ago at all. And actually, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about is a potential matchup for Little Nog would be a rematch with Shogun. So let's skip and go to that one because I'm going to rant quite a bit when we get to the Maia Brown fight. So we're just going to put a pin in that. But Lil Nog ended up beating Patrick Cummins with 9 seconds left in the first round. And that was rough to watch. I mean, I'm not going to criticize Patrick Cummins' chin, but his 3 losses have come from real rough knockouts.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, that's one of the things that I did a little note taking on. Yeah, okay. So 8-4, right? Lost the last 2 fights, both technical knockouts. All losses of Pat Cummins have come to knockout and or technical knockout. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like from his fight, he's just lack of movement, lack of head movement. He was just, it seemed like he was standing straight up. There wasn't any level changes. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I saw attempts at head movement, but it wasn't very effective. It was kind of this side, very predictable thing. And you have a guy with a tremendous amount of experience. It was a little bizarre. And it seemed like he expected himself to be better at the grappling. And he was 0-2 for takedowns. One of them was really bad. I mean, he got underhooks on Little Nog and then just stood there. And even Bryan Sanders was like, well, that's going to bolster Little Nog's. Actually, he called him Little Nogueira. Bryan Sanders kept saying, Little Nogueira. It's going to bolster his confidence. And I was like, who the fuck is Little Nogueira? And where the fuck is Lil Nog? Nog.
Like, funny.
Like Lil Romeo and Lil Bow Wow, Lil Nog. That's what it's always been. Bryan, am I wrong?
No, it's always been Little Nog. It's Big Nog and Little Nog. I mean, it's essentially the same thing as me growing up, like, with my older brother. He was only a year older than me through high school. Everybody would call me Little Kurt. Nobody called me Bryan. It was just weird. But anyways, as I was going back to the fight itself, I mean, okay, so, like, Cummins, as far as fighting, like, his record, like, he's 8-4. Okay, but when you look at his 4 losses, right? I mean, how could you be mad at the guy, and how can you honestly like feel like maybe he's on the downward trend of being in the UFC? Okay, losses:
Daniel Cormier,
Teixeira, OSP, and Daniel Cormier. Those guys are all either champions or we're fighting for titles. So I mean,
Yeah, let's give him an easier fight. How about that for number 14th ranked guy in the world? This is my dream fight for him right now. I think that he should fight number 15, Jean Vellante, in a loser leaves town match. What do you think?
No, I mean, if Jean Vellante wins, then Cummins leaves? No. I don't feel like Cummins needs to go anywhere.
But I think it's a great fight. It's dynamic. The UFC likes both guys, and it gives one of them a huge push, whereas the other one, I mean, there's no shame in like going to Titan and being a Titan champion. Both these guys have a tremendous amount of potential, but they both just keep going way too far ahead of where they should be. Right, John Vellante fighting Ilir Latifi? Are you kidding me? Like, who's managing that guy? That's a dumb fight to take.
Yeah, no, you know, that's also true. I mean, and I also wouldn't mind seeing Cummins at Bellator. So.
Hell yeah! You mean to tell me that, like, I mean, Phil Davis, that would be a fun fight, but I think I fancy Patrick Cummins in a fight with King Mo. I think that he would do. It would be a very exciting fight with Liam McGeary. I think that he'd have a lot of success there, and there's no reason not to. I mean, like, we're becoming in an era where it's just alternative brands, and sure, it might be the generic brand of Lucky Charms that has a wizard on the box of it, but really, at the end of the day, if you're in the mood for Lucky Charms, you'll settle for the fucking thing. If you're in the mood for MMA and you stumble on Bellator, you're gonna be fine. It's a fair product. It's nowhere near as bad as it used to be.
You know what I mean? I mean, if Cummins, as far as where he's hovering in the top 15, if he were to jump over to Bellator, I can guarantee you he's probably going to be making more money right off the bat in Bellator than he would in UFC.
Absolutely. And he doesn't have the tenure where Reebok's paying him worth a dick. He would be a guy who I think that, Bellator would go for just on a basic level of actually making an effort. And then B, who is a marketable guy. I mean, he's a former All-American wrestler, Durkin. You saw he was on the MMA Fighting pre-fight show. The guy clearly can talk. He's articulate. He's likable. He's got a cute butt. I mean, Bryan, let's agree on that.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so let's go back up the card because I think now it's time to talk about, Alves Barberena. We caught that. Now it's Demian Maia, Matt Brown. Bryan, get everything you want to say out on this one because I'm just going to go on a fucking rant when you're done. So you say you, I say me, go.
Okay. Well, okay. Matt Brown flipping everybody off, I get it because they all say they want to kill him. And it makes sense because he's walking to the ring and there's multiple people trying to kill him, as we saw in the walkout. Matt Brown trying to defend the takedowns, not so much. You need to change something up. Make Demian Maia have to actually work a little harder to get those takedowns because for somebody like Demian Maia to just be able to wrap you up and drop you to the ground and essentially hump you for 2.5 rounds means you're doing something wrong. It was interesting. I guess maybe we'll touch on it on broadcast about the whole fight after the fight, with Matt Brown's ex-coach. Apparently,
we will, Bryan.
Right. I saw a video and there's like blood on the street and stuff, and like he got knocked out, or not knocked out, but he got hit pretty freaking hard.
Don't divulge too much. We need to sucker our one viewer that's live on YouTube and to stay tuned for the broadcast.
Right, my bad. But yeah, I mean, I'm stoked on Demian Maia winning. Let's see here. Where is my notes? Damn it. Okay, five fight win streak. Right. He's okay. He's a ripe old age of 38, so there's always that. But he's not really taking much punishment in his fights. You know what I mean? So there's that to say about Demian Maia. He's 23-6, right? 5-fight win streak. I pretty much think he has the most dominant ground game in the UFC. Would that be unfair to say?
I think it's absolutely true. And not a boring one at all. I love watching Demian Maia fight. I get so excited about it. And I mean, I used to watch guys like Jacob Volkman and John Fitch and be like, okay. Well, I was never like anti that, but it was just okay. But I get like fucking pumped when Demian Maia is going to fight. it's
the thing that's different between Demian Maia and somebody like John Finch in his prime is John Finch is a wrestler, true to form. They will hold you down and grind you out. Demian Maia uses wrestling to transition to his bread and butter. You know what I mean? So it's like he has that one extra level of game to whatever Fitch had. So who I have Maia fighting next would be the winner of Hendricks and Gastelum. Would you agree?
I don't. And the only reason is because I don't know if you saw today's rankings, which are modified, and now he's ranked number 4 at welterweight. So he actually went up significantly, and Matt Brown is now number 8. They just pretty much switched spots. So now the only people ahead of Demian Maia would be Tyron Woodley, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Roy McDonald, and Robbie Lawler. So if you look at those guys, really he should sit pretty and try and get.
So he's lost against Roy McDonald, right? And what was his other loss to 170?
Jake Shields, and it was a split decision, and it was bullshit.
Right.
Absolute bullshit.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, his record since he's gone to 170 has been he's 8-2.
Yeah, well, he's really 9-1 in my opinion, because I don't think that Shields beat him. There was a great moment in that fight where Shields holding him up against the cage, and Maia's like, "What is this? He's laying here. He's not doing shit." And that, don't get me started on that. That makes me angry, and my scrotum like tightens up, and it feels like a little brain in my shorts, and I just get mad.
She can help you out with that one.
Please, under the desk that I have all of my writing materials on. Bryan, do you have any point? Quick and make your points, because I'm going to freak out in a couple seconds about this fight.
No, I
do agree with you. I think that.
Okay, one more. I'm going to go over Matt Brown. What I thought was, my little points here. Okay, Matt Brown, 35 years old, 20-14. That's it's kind of a shaky record there. Lost 3 of his last 4, but we're all 2 established fighters.
Oh yeah.
Lawler, Hendricks, and Maia. You know what I mean? Next fight for Matt Brown, maybe Neil Magny. That's who I see possibly.
Unfortunately, they both train out of Elevation Fight Team, so I don't know that would happen.
Never mind.
But you know who I want? If Tarek Saffiedine wins his next fight, that's the fight I want to see, because that fight would be fucking tremendous. I don't know how familiar you are with Tarek Saffiedine. To my knowledge, he's only fought twice in the UFC since Strikeforce. But I
think Tarek Saffiedine, wasn't he the one that fucked up Nate Marquardt like really bad?
Yep. Ruined his leg? Yeah. That would be a killer fight, because you'd have this brawler with throwing elbows and this very precise, dangerous-looking dude who, I mean, sure, he lost to Rory McDonald, but, I mean, kind of who hasn't right now? Even to your point, Demian Maia did. How about this scenario of things? Demian Maia getting the loser of Rory McDonald, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, the winner of that fight fighting Robbie Lawler, and then Demian Maia, if he gets past it, gets next in line. Because let's face it, up until today, he was ranked number 8 at welterweight. Do you think that's fair?
No, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Absolutely. I mean, I was talking.
It makes a hell of a lot more sense than Tyron Woodley. Can we talk about Tyron Woodley? I'm still mad about that.
No, I mean, it definitely makes more sense than the Hendricks Gastelum now that I think about it, especially as far as the significant bump in, rankings. So yeah, absolutely. He's hovering. You know, I mean, that's a word that you want to have associated with your name when it comes to the UFC. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And if you are Matt Brown and Johnny Hendricks gets by Kelvin Gastelum's 13, Johnny Hendricks is 6, Matt Brown is 8. So if Johnny Hendricks wins again, you could totally make a campaign for a rematch if you want it, but you need to work on your wrestling a hell of a lot. So I think you might want to stay away from that. Neil Magny's ranked above him. Dong Hyun Kim isn't a big enough name at 9. I think Tarek Saffiedine would be good. Another fight that would be fucking rad, Rick Story. That would be a killer fight. Agree? Disagree?
Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that they're both, they both like to stand and bang. It's not going to be one where somebody's going to get taken down. You know what I mean? I feel it may be taken down and ground and pound, but there's not going to be that submission game,
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I am looking real quick at the rest of the notes, and I think we're good. So now it's my chance to do a nationalism rant. Are you ready for this? Because I'm only going to do it once. So nationalism is the exact fucking same thing as racism. It is an immutable, an unchangeable thing. You cannot change the color of your skin. You cannot change where you were born, and it has no bearing on who you are as a person at all. Motherfuckers, Donald Trump was born here. That doesn't make him a good person. I don't like him. He's a piece of shit. Same thing, just because somebody's born in Afghanistan or anywhere else doesn't make them a piece of shit. So this whole chanting USA all the time, this whole chanting that people are going to die all the time, it's fucking bullshit. And then you have Matt Brown at the weigh-ins who's filming it. He pumps his fist. He's trying to be energetic, and everybody's chanting he's going to fucking die. Yeah, it was a terrible fight for him to take. It was a fight, even though he's one of my top 10 favorite fighters, I didn't want him to take because I knew it was a stylistically terrible matchup. He knows that he's at a disadvantage. He's going into enemy territory, and he's still doing it on a big scale, and people are chanting he's going to die, and then he flips him off, and then people are like, you went too far. You offended us.
Right.
Well, how about the fact in the chronological order of events, you were just saying this guy was going to die. He defends himself, and now you're playing victim? And who the fuck thinks that gives you an excuse to lay hands on a human being? Sanctioned fighter, you do not touch someone. He got hit 3 times, twice with closed fists, and then one, a guy grabbed him by the hood and yanked his head backwards. And people are like, oh, well, don't worry, that guy got ejected. No, motherfucker committed assault. He should, A, spend a little time in jail, and B, have to pay damages to Matt Brown, because that is assault and that is battery. The law defines a battery as a harmful or offensive touching. Sure, he's a fighter. He's a trained fighter. I'm sure he's been hit worse than that. But the fact is it's still offensive. It is ridiculous to me that is allowed to happen, and that people are like, yeah. And Uriah Hall chimed in when we were having an exchange with some of our fans, and he was saying, well, you do the same thing if somebody did this to you. Absolutely not. And he later conceded my point was correct, so there's no animosity towards Uriah Hall. Because my point is, it does not matter where you are born. If you honestly think that just because somebody's from a different country, they're better or worse off by de facto, just stop watching the show, because I don't have patience for it. It just doesn't make sense. Your argument is invalid and wrong. And I'm trying to wrap this up into a tight thing. But the fact that, Matt Brown, in 2 gestures, right, he flips off the Brazilian people, and then his former coach sucker punches him in the face, who had a business and communal relationship with this guy, who's going to be, act betrayed because of a gesture. Motherfucker, sit on this finger and spin. Unacceptable. Not okay. And the fact that UFC isn't coming out and making a harsh statement about this is ridiculous. And obviously Matt Brown didn't lose because he had a concussion, because he was smacked by a fan. But still, you want to talk about nerves for Fabricio Werdum. How about those nerves? Right? Somebody just laid hands on you.
I think I had mentioned something during the fight about God, I don't even think Chael Sonnen had it this bad.
He didn't. In fact, he was cheered when he fought Anderson the second time. People were, it's lunacy. And obviously that wasn't even in Brazil. I think both of those fights took place in Vegas, but there was a huge Brazilian contingent there. And by the end of it, he makes a joke about fucking Anderson Silva's wife at a barbecue, and people don't think there's anything wrong in that. I'm sorry. How is that any different than flipping someone off? Am I crazy, Bryan? Because I looked on Twitter, and man, it was literally pissing me off to see how people were like, oh yeah, fuck. Just on the same point. I'm not being critical of just Brazilians. My point is that everybody fucking does it. So I'm not sitting here and being like, those people are fucked and those people are wrong. That's just absolutely silly. The idea is that we shouldn't be doing this as a learned people. We should be elevated beyond this. This is some weird Cro-Magnon shit that needs to die.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Thank you. So with that, my rant is over, but I think you guys get my point. I tweeted it earlier this week, and I still stand by it. Every single fighter who I support, I do so based on merit. It has nothing to do the color of their skin, where they were born, or what kind of shitty tattoos they have. Boom.
Okay. Next fight, Nate Marquardt getting knocked out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that Nate Marquardt should be sponsored by Monster, and I'm not talking about the energy drink. I'm talking about the job application website because he needs to be looking.
Right. It's something that oh man, I feel like he's past the gatekeeper role. Come on now. It's just you need to stop fighting. Like, I don't know.
Bro is 2-6 in his last 8.
2-6. Absolutely.
Which is not good.
Yep.
I mean, you can go farther back in his record, and he has, he's had stints that were good, but after he fought Anderson Silva, his career did not do so good, my friend.
Okay, so like I said, you already touched a point on it, but my notes. Nate Marquardt, 37 years old, he's getting up there. Although you gotta imagine, and you gotta think about like the fighters who are on this fight card. I think the average age is around 35, which is.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Anyways, so he's 34 and 16. So he's definitely up there as far as mileage on the fights. But
and a former TRT user, so you have to factor that in.
How many of those were under TRT? Of his last 8, dating back to 2013, he is 2-6. Come on now. Hanging up the gloves. Do everybody a favor. He's past.
Do your kids a favor, right? I mean, they want their dad to remember their birthday, and not just because Facebook sends them a notification.
Right. Thiago Santos, okay, 32 years old, 13-3. He's on a 4-fight win streak. He's got 8 knockouts, 1 submission, 4 decision. I feel like he can get a rematch with Uriah Hall. What do you think?
That's an interesting argument. I can get behind
I don't know. Uriah Hall's going after Anderson Silva. Essentially, you're looking at Thiago Santos beating a has-been in Nate Marquardt. I'm not saying Anderson Silva is a has-been or in the same category as Nate Marquardt, but Anderson Silva is also up there in age. Has a lot of fights under his belt, so they are kind of in the same kind of place.
Career trajectory, yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's fair. Who do you think? Okay, so I want to talk about Thiago Santos's matchmaking in the broadcast, because there are some points I want to make on statements he made after the fight that I think globally apply to fighters. So it's a much more general, amorphous topic. So when it comes to, let's just look at it. Nate Marquardt is currently unranked. Santos, he won, and now he became ranked. It's always kind of weird when you have 2 unranked fighters who end up getting ranked, but obviously you can't just have ranked fighters fighting unranked fighters, because it just wastes that person's trajectory moving forward. So like you look at the guys who Marquardt has lost to, and they're like good, but this is a fight where he was fighting a guy who on paper should have been within that. If you're a gatekeeper, this is the exact thing that you always want to rebut. You have a guy who's young, who's trying to make a name off of you, and sorry, Nate, but he made a name off of you the same way that I'm looking back, Kelvin Gastelum made a name off of you. Tavares, Hector Lombard, Jake Ellenberger, Tarek Safadine. I mean,
and it's funny that like you bring that up, and that I said earlier, okay, he's past his prime as far as being a gatekeeper, but essentially he's doing his job in being a gatekeeper, right? If that makes any sense. Like, he's essentially propelling other people forward for, I feel like that what keeper does. So for him to lose to these guys and propel them forward, I guess he's doing his job, but I mean, it just looks bad.
Yeah, it's kind of like leasing a car, You're just on borrowed time, and you're just throwing money away, and the UFC is not giving him anything. They're not giving him a way to get up. He's just maintaining a status quo until the end, and then he drops off. At the end of it, he has nothing that's his. He has a name brand that he can't use. He barely was able to use it in Strikeforce after he was kicked out for the whole TRT nonsense. I feel bad for the guy. Like, I like Nate Marquardt. I enjoyed watching him beat CB Dollaway. But the fact is, CB Dollaway wasn't that good. You know, like
Nope.
CB Dollaway had a pretty great streak appear out of nowhere, and we were all like, "What the fuck?" And then it had to end, and then it ended hard.
Right. The fact is, he exposed CB Dollaway for what he is. You know what I mean? And is that a bad thing? No.
And so I think on that, we'll talk about the Santos guy. We've talked about the Marquardt guy. Let's talk pretty briefly about Francisco Trinaldo versus Yancy Medeiros, John Lineker versus Rob Font. One of the things I found interesting about this fight, or these fights rather, is that both of them had 10-8 rounds. Brian, what do you think about that shiz?
You know, it's okay. So the Francisco Trinaldo Medeiros fight, I mean, I see it very much a unanimous, but I don't know if I saw it as 10-8. I don't know. Nothing too overly decisive compared to some, you know, 29, whatever the fuck, 20, however they score it, cards or rounds, you know, in other fights in the past where it's, you know, clearly it seems like it should be a 10-8 and it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like, in comparison, like, it seems like, I don't know, I didn't see anything too spectacular to make it a 10-8.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with you on that point, and I think that there's been so many times where I've clamored and been like physically upset to the point of like my nationalism rant about how a fighter didn't get a 10-8, where this is like, he got 10-8s. That's cool. I guess it shows that we're moving in the right direction, but
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like Medeiros was, I mean, he was definitely engaging in the fight. I don't know if, I mean, it's just, it's hard to, I guess, distinguish between the 10-8 and the other. So, I don't know. I mean, from Francisco Trinaldo, okay, like, you know, clearly wins a strike game in that fight, and he's on a 6-fight win streak. So that's definitely something for him.
yeah. And what do you think of John Lineker? Winning at bantamweight, he was good at flyweight. He's been on a streak. What do we do with that guy?
Lineker, Dodson.
Hell yes. I second that. Do you want to move on to Bellator 154?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's touch base on that real quick.
Okay, so we both agreed. We watched it together. King Mo versus Phil Davis is not the crime of the century. Like, I get it. It was close, but it's not the crime of the century. Don't cry foul. This is not something that you want to die on your sword over in some flippant internet war that's going to be obsolete come next week's event.
I feel like it's somebody who's looking at those notes a little too closely might see a unanimous over a split being something to like scratch your head or maybe get angry over. I mean, I don't feel like it was necessarily unanimous. It was definitely going back and forth as far as pace. I don't know if, I mean, we were talking about this earlier. I don't know if it's necessarily in judges or it's based off of the rounds itself. So it seemed like, I don't know. It was kind of a back and forth pace. I definitely feel like Davis had the better of Mo throughout the fight. I don't see there being any issue with the end result.
I agree. I think it's a fight that's worth watching. It was decent. We talked about the Sayada Wad versus Cyborg Santos, not Cyborg Justino fight. And the one that we really wanted to talk about was Andre Fiallo versus Rick Rieger. Wow.
Yeah, okay,
man.
So Andre Fiallo, does he have a nickname? It should be like the Assassin or some kind of menacing nickname because the guy is a beast.
Yeah, dude, he needs to be called like Creeping Death or something because it looked like his heart rate never went up.
Right.
Andre,
what is that?
The Undertaker's motherfucking big brother Fiallo. What do you think about that?
What is the nickname of like the bubonic plague? Is it the Black Death?
The Black Plague.
The Black
Plague. Or the Black Death, either way.
Yeah, that could be his nickname, and it makes sense.
I feel like Derek Lewis would probably be a better Black Death, though. You know, the Black Beast thing is scary, but like, dude looks like he could kill you more than he could just knock you out. This guy was a little pale face for that. Like, how about the White Death? That sounds racist as fuck. Let's go back. Aryan, no, thank you. Sorry. I've actually been reading a lot on World War II history, so I definitely shouldn't have said that. I'm not.
How many World War II and or Nazi like history books there are. I feel like there's more that than anything. Like anytime you turn on the History Channel, it's like all about like hunting Hitler and like what?
Oh yeah, dude, Ben McIntyre. Know that name, memorize it. Read the book Operation Mincemeat, and right now I'm reading Agent Zigzag, which sounds like it's a stoner thing, like a Cheech and Chong movie, but it's actually about a double agent who double agented and double agented again and just kept going back and forth between Nazi Germany and the Brits. It's pretty legit, dude. So, yeah. Don't knock it till you try it, Bryan. I will buy you the fucking book on tape for you to read while you're in the car, and you will love it. You'll thank me for it because it's definitely more entertaining than this show. I mean, it's not. So those of you watching at home should definitely keep watching us and not change it over to the History Channel.
Right.
Fuck, there goes our one viewer. Sammy Eid, stay online, my friend. I see your comments earlier, bruh. I do think that Shogun versus Bader would be a fun fight, and I agree that it's not boxing, and just because you get a knockdown at the end of a round, you shouldn't win the round. I agree. We agreed with you. I didn't say that I agree with you, but I agree with you. And for those of you listening at home wondering what the fuck I'm talking about, if you watch live like some of our loyal viewers, you could totally interject, and I will comment upon that in the show because I'm obsessive and compulsive in that way. So the last thing to talk about, which is totally worth talking about, Glory 30. If you didn't watch it, get off your broke ass, watch your UFC Fight Pass, put it to use. Murat Grigorian versus Kolibali Djimi. Wow, that was hard to say, but it was not hard to watch. One of the greatest head kick knockouts I've ever seen, and I've never seen a timber that was so good. It was just like a fucking movie. It was like watching Billy Jack, where he's like, I'm going to take this here boot and put on the side of that there the head, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. And then he kicks him in the head. Damn thing. So you need to watch that fight. Bryan, do you have any closing remarks for the podcast before we steamroll unlubricated and rough into the broadcast?
Well, that was a bit much. No, I feel like we covered pretty much everything that we needed to. So it was a good show.
Awesome. So for now, that's Bryan. I'm Jake. We are underpaid, overworked, and out of time for this week. Make sure to stay tuned for the Overtime MMA broadcast on the same YouTube channel that you better be liking, you better be subscribing to, or I'm going to run wild